Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Kefauver. Friends, I am so thrilled to be saying these words. Welcome, Wendy MacNaughton, to Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation.
Lisa, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be speaking with you.
This is phenomenal. I'm sure the folks who listen to the show or follow me on socials at Lisa Kefauver MSW, Grief is a Sneaky Bitch, have already seen pictures of the book, heard me talking about the book on Reels or whatever socials I decided to do. But I'm so thrilled to be diving into our conversation today. You all heard Wendy is a fellow social worker and she's an artist, a drawn journalist, if that's a title I can use. You're going to help me understand a little bit more about that. And she has created, I don't even want to just say created this beautiful book. If you're watching us on socials, How to Say Goodbye, which is, I'll let her tell you a little bit more about it, but just such a beautiful collection of almost poetic wisdom from hospice caregivers and her own beautiful drawings that really help tell a story. It's a book to be read like quietly and, slowly. And I just kind of spent time with it and paid attention to it, which we're going to talk about as a theme of your work. So anyways, there'll be a link in my show notes for today's episode, folks. Yeah. Thank you, Wendy. This is extraordinary, really extraordinary. Unlike anything I've ever, I have the opportunity to read, of course, and be in conversation with a lot of authors for my work here on the podcast. And I've just never come across anything like this. And as I think
it's a weirdo kind of book, isn't it?
But it's phenomenal. But part of what we're going to talk about today, which is why I think it's so beautiful, as you said, which is drawing can get us, not only the act of drawing creates an intimacy and a connection and a way of paying attention that words don't, but it also gets us to a different space in our understanding of things. And that's why the combination of sort of the poetic words of wisdom and the drawing, I think, is beautifully unique. And I'm so excited for the listeners to pick up a copy.
Thank you.
Yeah. So go ahead, please.
No, I'm just going to say it was, I appreciate how you say that it's kind of something to be looked at like slowly. And I do think that drawing is something that we do slowly, right? When we're drawing something, we slow down, we pay attention to it in a new way. We look closely at things that we often kind of hurry past and might not even notice. And then when somebody looks at a drawing that somebody has made with like time and care, that kind of energy comes through those lines. And I think that we slow down ourselves. And that book, I created almost all of it at the Zen Hospice Project, which at a guest house, it's no longer around anymore. It's closed several years ago. But it was a 6-bed hospice house. And similar to the drawing, the pace of drawing and the time and care, that house, this 6-bed hospice house, also kind of had that same pace. So hopefully that comes across in the book.
Absolutely. And we're going to dive into that work and your artist residency at Zen Hospice Project and all of the turns that you've taken in through your career. But I wanted to start a conversation where I start all of my conversations, slowing down and maybe going back a little to the beginning. I invite each of my guests over these past 5 seasons to kind of explore and be curious about how they develop the grief beliefs they have, whether those are ones that serve us or not in our adulthood when we're facing our own losses. And so I'm wondering if you can think back to an early memory of loss, could be a death loss or some other kind of loss in your childhood, and what you think you learned by the sort of words or actions or inactions of the adults around you about what grief should or, shouldn't look like.
Yeah, it's such an important question that I think we can all learn so much by reflecting upon. I appreciate you asking. I grew up in a family that I would say is full of love and care and effusiveness on some sides. On the other side, maybe a little more repressed in terms of emotions, but always just wanting to create like a safe, positive atmosphere. The flip side of that was not being comfortable with hard feelings and actively pushing hard feelings, and I would say big feelings, away, and thinking that those should become easier.
Yeah.
Everything should be easy.
Yeah.
So the first time that I lost somebody, and that's what I'll talk about, was my who was very, very close to me. The first time I lost somebody who was very close to me was my maternal grandmother, who was a force of a woman.
Love it. Love it.
She kind of exposed me to the arts. I've always been a visual person and I always loved to draw. And I do attribute a lot of that to my grandmother's encouragement. She would take me to museums and she would take me to plays and she would yell at me to look at things, pay attention to things, and she'd get mad at me if I didn't. So really, she's deep
Yeah.
in my bones. She's deep in
Yeah.
my bones. And when she was dying, I there wasn't a lot of conversation around it. My mother did a great job taking care of her, but I was also a teenager at the time and I was not around a lot. When she was actively dying, I remember I was invited to go and just sit with her alone for a couple minutes and say what I needed to say. That was kind of the only like
Instruction or
instruction
invitation.
or
Yeah.
anything that I had received. And I went in and I was completely emotionally unprepared to what it would feel like to be sitting with somebody I loved who was dying, and also not knowing what to say or what to do or anything. And I'm letting go of the regret around it, but I handled it in a way that I carried a lot of regret with me for some time. I actually felt angry with her that she couldn't respond to me. I was trying to talk to her and I wanted her to say something back because I wanted that sense of connection that we'd always had. And as a result, I didn't end up saying the things that I wish I'd said, and I didn't sit and I wasn't present with her in the way I wish I could have been. So I carried that feeling with me of regret and discomfort for a very long time, and feel like I have been trying to actively undo the fears that I brought into that room. And I'm somebody who kind of throws myself into things. Like if I
I
want
can
to,
relate. Yeah. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
And also in this space, we might find a lot of people like that who are
Yes.
really,
Yeah.
we try to learn and to grow and to face hard things and to welcome big feelings so
Yeah.
that we can become more open and more connected to people. So
Yeah.
while I was not prepared in a family, my family's still the same way, doesn't really love to talk about hard things. I'm grateful for that experience in retrospect because it's pushed me to grow more into a person that I want to be.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing some of those origins. What was your maternal grandmother's name? I'd love to bring her name into the
Her,
room if you don't mind sharing.
yes, her name was Bernice Friedman Ash, but I called her Nani.
Nani. Well, thank you for sharing Nani with us. And also just
Mm.
sharing, I think has become a familiar theme on the show. And for so many listeners can relate, which is many of us did not grow up in families where we talked about hard, and even that word, I feel something about saying it, but yeah, hard feelings. And that really shaped what we feel is okay to be with. And if we don't have the experience of being with hard feelings in the room of people who care for us and nurture us and model that, then how could we know? So I would just say to teenage Wendy, and maybe even to the adult Wendy that's hanging on, is like, how could it have been any other way? How could you have known how to be, be the kind of person you might be at somebody's bedside now? Then nothing in your life showed you how to do that. First of all, teenagers, even if somebody told you about how to do it, like, hello, teenage brains are just,
Right.
right? They're their own soup. But, I think, to the degree that you've been trying to soften that regret, I just hear it so often in the clients when I work with individuals, companies, listeners who write into the show. And I just want us all to, that's why I'm trying to bring these grief beliefs to the surface and
Yeah.
trying to really shift our narratives of grief and make us all so much more grief literate, because how could it have been any other way? You had
No,
nobody who
that's right.
modeled. And so why you would
No,
hold, now not picking on you, but I think we all do
no,
this.
no,
We
no.
hold ourselves to some standard, like
Right,
we should know how to do things, but how could we know how to do things when
right.
no one is modeling that for us? And that's what I
No,
hope these conversations, my TED Talk, everything that I do in my work,
yeah.
I'm really trying to model so that maybe for that next person. I was not prepared when I laid with my husband when he died.
Mm,
And so, or my friend Joe, I mean, by the time I was with my friend Joe when he passed a few years later, I had learned some things. And we're going to talk a
mhm.
little bit about the nature of being with someone when they pass in your work later on in your artist residency. But anyways, just offering
I
you that.
appreciate, thank you. Yeah. And I hope I am learning also to, and I think we all learn to like give ourselves some grace
Yeah.
um, and I think everybody carries regret. Like that. I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
on one hand, I say I regret nothing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, because I am appreciative for everything, for all of it.
Yeah.
Because every time that I do have a feeling of regret, whether it's like a deep experience like that, or it's like, oh my God, I just said something embarrassing and vulnerable instead of somebody, that
Yeah.
cringy feeling or whatever. It's always an invitation to pay attention to something that it's an opportunity for examination. It's an
Learn.
opportunity for growth. It's an opportunity for connection. It's saying like, oh, there was disruption there, right?
Yeah.
There's something there
Yes.
to lean into. So I also don't regret the regret. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it pushes us forward in beautiful ways.
It's such a human experience, to your point. And I think the degree to which we can have a lens of curiosity towards it and as a lens of like learning from it, I think is where it has its, where it can propel us forward and maybe have us learn some new skills or show up in connection in new ways in similar or even different scenarios that happen kind of going forward. So yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that. So your journey to this book has been such a fascinating one. I've been doing a deep dive into your life prior to our conversation today. But as I said at the top of the show, one of the things that I sort of love, I'm not sure that I've ever met an artist who's also a social worker. Shout out to us, fellow social worker. Woo, woo. And how that has informed the evolution of your work as a writer in advertising, as a journalist, as an illustrator.
You did do some homework.
I did do some homework. But, one of the things I heard you saying, we chatted about this a little off air, but I think it just is worth saying on air, is I think it sort of sets the stage to sort of this book and the work that you're doing was, you said once that you don't think of yourself as like, I have a social work degree. Social work is kind of the foundation of how you see the world, how you walk in the world, including the, artistic work that you do. And I so appreciate that, because I think, and I imagine many people in varying fields can feel this way, but when my daughter was a teenager, she used to say, "Stop social working me," when I would speak to her in a certain language, and I would be like, "I don't know this is who I am. This is how I think. This is how I
Yes,
talk." And she's like, "No, you're not. You're social working me." And I'm like,
I know. My
I
family says
promise
the
I'm
same
not."
thing. My
Yeah.
family says the same thing. I think especially when I got out of social work school, I was like, there's a certain language, right? That I
Yes.
think, especially when we're like really,
Fresh,
coming on
fresh.
strong, fresh, and I it was when I, when I hear you say when I hear you say this,
Yeah.
what I'm what I'm hearing is like, it's like, stop. Stop social working me. Like, no,
That's
but and at the same time, um, little did I know when I went into social work school that training would become the foundation, not only of my work, but of my communication.
yeah.
Like, with my family and my friends I mean, it is such a fundamental skill set
Yeah. Deep listening,
of
I think, is something.
listening,
Yes.
Yes. Just active listening. I think if we all just did a course in active listening in
Yeah.
every field, I
Yes.
think that, I mean, honestly, I say that a lot, that it's shocking to me that I don't meet more people who have done either a social work degree or done some kind of training in social work, because it is so useful in so
Yeah.
many different fields, especially the field of being a human being.
I mean, which, we're all in, regardless of your
Yes.
profession. Yeah. I think that's such an important point, and I can see it so clearly in the work, the physical manifestations of your work, but also even as I have read and learned about kind of how you've showed up in the world, there's this real power. And your talk, I think it's called The Art of Paying, your TED Talk, The Art of Paying Attention, was yet another example of this, is the power that we have um, in active listening and paying attention. My thesis in graduate school was holding space and bearing witness. That was what I was,
Mm.
interested in. It's that same notion, is like, as humans, so much of the rupture and the despair and the suffering that we all experience is because we are not showing up present, is another way to say it, paying attention, being curious, um,
Mhm.
being, not doing,
Yes.
and I think that absolutely, that's part of our cultural baggage, because, we're a
Yes.
culture of doers. But I think
Yes.
it's so much of the harm that comes to us in our grief. And as
Mm.
you've noticed in your work, it's also sometimes the rupture or the harm that can come when people are trying to accompany someone they love, at the end of their life, because they don't know how how to show up and be versus show up and do.
Right. And do. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that's our so many cultures. But I think, here I'll just speak to the one that we're in the US, and um, the cultural background that I come from. Um, Especially right now with the kind of like information bombardment we have going on all of the time. It's
Yeah.
just, I mean, what we have coming at us throughout the day, it's relentless. It's all calling for our attention, and it's pushing us to do something.
Yeah.
And ultimately, what it's saying is that if you have feelings, I would say, that are uncomfortable, but if you have feelings, period,
Period.
then you should do something about them, right? Because it's
Yes.
like it's an opportunity to be pushed into action because of capitalism. It's just what it
Yeah.
is. People are trying to
Yeah.
sell us stuff. So that's what's just
Yeah.
happening all the time. It's, again, we can't blame ourselves for it. It's kind of how we were raised, right?
Yeah.
So of course we want to do things when the big feelings come up. And for myself personally, as an artist, I am like a maker. Like, I make things and I do things. And I think there's different modes of doing. There's
Yeah.
like a kind of quiet, creative doing, and then there's a reactive, fixing doing, right?
Yeah.
They're really two different spaces. The reactive, fixing doing is, I think, at least I'll just speak for
No,
myself.
it's yeah.
It's everywhere. I think
Yeah.
a lot of us, let's just say a lot of us have it. Um,
And again, how
it's
could it
my
be any
kind of,
other way? Because that is the culture that we live in. We live in a capitalist culture that is about doing and production and consumption. And
that's right.
so, I mean, again, how could it be any other way? Of course, it takes real, in my experience, real intentionality and learning to push back against our instinct to be in that fixing doing versus that being creative doing, because it's the air we breathe.
That's right. And it's such an interesting question to come up against. And this is what I think happens at the bedside is, well, what happens if we let go of that, right?
Yeah.
Because we can't do anything. We can't fix anything. I mean, people, we'll try, right?
Yes.
We'll
Yeah.
definitely try. And a lot of people, the entire medical system, I mean,
Yeah.
everything is, uh, but what happens when we let go of trying to fix things, or
Yeah.
trying to react to things, and sit with what's really going on in the room,
Yeah.
and sit with whatever's coming up for us inside and whatever's coming up for someone else, and
Yeah.
just be and let that unfold.
Yeah.
What I think so many of us are so scared of what lies beyond that, that we spend our entire lives avoiding it.
A
And
hundred.
that's,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, a
Well, it
lot.
feels to me that your work is really inviting us in different modes and different ways to come to experiencing and practicing that. I think I'd like to think of my work including this podcast as that. But I want to touch on the fact that even with your social work, I can't remember the order of things, but
Yeah.
you maybe weren't always the person who was comfortable showing up at somebody's bedside. I think you shared the story of your aunt, maybe, who's even
Yeah.
drawings in the book, right? And kind of being with her towards the end of her life and not knowing how to be with her. Can you tell us a little bit about that and then how that you said you jump into things. I think that's what spurred you to just jump in full force to the artist residency at Zen Hospice.
Yeah. So I told you a bit about my grandmother. That happened early on in my life. My aunt, on my dad's side, her name was Tildy. She had Parkinson's and was declining for quite some time, and we were close. I spent a lot of time with her, and as she was also a kindergarten teacher and
Nice.
An artist herself.
Oh,
And so as she was declining, I was drawing her just as I would visit because she wasn't speaking very much, and you hang out, and
yeah.
she got used to me drawing. And then as she was actively dying in her last week, I started drawing her every day at the bedside. And I think the reason I did that was similar to like how I experienced my grandmother's death earlier. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I was scared. I hadn't been taught really anything.
Of course. Yeah.
And I didn't know how to be. And so as an artist, drawing is this tool that I have that I think any of us can use to pay attention to something, to look closely at something or someone who we might otherwise avoid or ignore. And so in those last days, when I found myself fearful, like I didn't want to like look too much at Tildy because I didn't want to make her uncomfortable. Like those are the kinds of things that kind of go through somebody's head.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
but drawing was a way that I could really look closely at her and really connect with her in that way. So that was a really powerful experience. And she passed. And then I think it was within a day or two, I got a call from the Zen Hospice Project asking if I wanted to be the artist in residence there. And it was like one of those things, when the universe calls,
You
like
listen. Yeah.
you listen.
Yeah.
And so I absolutely and went in shortly after. And I ended up being there for almost a year. I was there for a big, I don't know, maybe 6 months, 7 months, something like that. Took a little bit of time off, came back, but I was there 2 days a week, getting to know the residents, the families, the caregivers, the volunteers, the nurses, drawing everything that I saw and writing down everything that I heard. And the result of that, putting those things together, became that little book that we're talking about, How to Say Goodbye.
Yeah, and I had heard, so this book had sort of been floating in circulation among, not in this form, of course, not in this published form, but right, it had been floating around in the world in more of a pamphlet or hand-drawn form in the past.
Wait, hold on, Lisa.
Yes.
I'm sorry I hope you
No,
can
you're
edit
fine.
that little bit
Yes,
out.
we can.
Did something just, hold on, good. Hold on. I thought I was on Do Not Disturb, but you're not. So something just blipped in.
Oh, weird.
Hold on. If you didn't,
I'm on Do Not Disturb, so I don't know.
Oh, I'm just on focus. Hold on one second. That was me.
No worries.
And we're back.
Bam. Don't worry
Go
about
back.
it.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, we'll go back. No,
Okay.
we'll go back. Well, one of the things, the book as it is today came out of those early drawings and writings, and as you said, but that was that was quite a while ago before it came into this form, but you were using the wisdom that you gained and gathered and sharing a version of this book, as I understand it, and with others along the way, which then ended up becoming this book. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. So
can you tell me? Yeah.
Yeah, I can just tell you really quickly that when that residency ended, I had all of these drawings and all of these words, and I I was trying to figure out what to do with them. I originally thought that I was going to be telling a very different story, but what came out of it, what I was so blown away by, was these caregivers and the experience that they had had, and how much I personally, and I think we all, could learn from them. Um, so I put the pictures and the words together, but and made a little book, but I didn't really feel comfortable taking that book and going to publishers, because that's entering this giant like machine where all of a sudden
Yes.
they're like, are you going to go market it? And how are you going to do this? And it was so deeply personal to me. There's drawings of my aunt in there. I have such reverence for everybody who's in the book. That I wasn't ready to do it. So my aunt Tildy, she had left me a little bit of money, and I took some of that and published 200 copies, just myself, and sent it out to people, friends and family, and just anybody I thought who could use it. People requested them, and I had only one request for them, and that's it. If you find it useful, kind of, share it with somebody else, pass it along. And I ran out of books, and people kept asking for more. So after some time, I was able to have enough kind of distance from the book, and felt like it was almost a way of like letting it go, letting.
Yeah.
And so now it's out in the world.
It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And I love how, so at the time, Dr. BJ Miller, for those who longtime listeners on the show know, I had a beautiful conversation with him called Unnecessary Suffering in season 3 of the podcast. He was the one who invited you to come be an artist in residence. And why do you think the power of aesthetics in that kind of space? Like, what did you know and want to bring? What was he looking for? How did that evolve? Because I think we forget, I'm often talking about the power of beauty as a healing tool for me and my grief. And I invite other people to, and beauty in that broadest sense of the word, right? Not, TikTok makeup beauty kind of thing. So but nobody's ever really, you put language to it before. I just sort of intuited my way into that. So what do you think it was about his request and about your bringing sort of awareness around aesthetics? Yeah.
Can I turn that around and ask what you found, how you've defined beauty and aesthetics for yourself in that?
I think for me, beauty, I attach quite a lot to nature, as sort of being in nature, sort of the natural world. And for me, I also like my space a certain way and have plant life, but there's always something about sort of life and light, and beauty for me was has been, continues to be, even as I'm talking to you, going through breast cancer treatment right now. And I can't maybe do all the things because of my energy, and my mobility that I have in the past. Beauty is, it's a perspective giver. It's a balm. It's also something that I can connect with people on. Like it's a source of connection sometimes where I can't maybe, not everybody can relate to being, having one breast and no hair, and, the journey that I'm going through going through cancer treatment. So I think it also is sort of a connection point between me and others too. Those are some of the things that come to me around why beauty has been. Yeah. And just a balm, from like, we can't be in the pain and the grief and the suffering and the hardness all the time. Although I invite us to be there more, like we've been talking about today. I think we, tend to run away from it. And as much as I invite us all, including myself, to practice being with it, not fixing it, but being with it, we can't be with it. And actually for me, when I've taken in beauty in whatever form it is, or been part of creating beauty, it actually allows me to be with the hard things more.
So it's not an either or, it's like an and.
Both and.
Yeah. I think that, thank you.
Yeah.
For sharing that.
Thanks for asking.
I think that's a lot of what I learned from BJ and his colleague, Lady Bird Morgan, who's a palliative care nurse who I met when at Zen Hospice. She was working there, and she was involved in the making this book too. Aesthetics, and you could say beauty. You could also, I like aesthetics because it incorporates also, I don't know, maybe like this, some smells aren't always the best smells, but they sure do provoke a memory that's important, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So it can be all of the senses, right?
Yes.
Those,
Yeah.
the aesthetics, like that, full bodied experience, no matter where we are in our body and which of those senses we have access to, maybe not all of them all of the
Yeah.
time, right? But the ones that we do have access to, that it brings us into the present and also
Yes.
brings us into our bodies and brings us into our hearts, our
Yes.
memories, our own personal narratives, our relationships, love,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and you know, as a visual artist, my like number one sense is visual.
Yeah.
That's my jam. That's what I'm always trying to pay attention to and notice. It's kind of my lens, so to speak, of how I view the world. One thing I learned at um, Zen Hospice and through this project is that there's a couple other senses that might be a little more immediate, not to create a hierarchy, but like
Yeah. Yeah.
smell, right?
Yeah.
Smell is so important. It's so important in terms of memory and in terms of feeling. And in Zen Hospice, in the guest house, there was always food being cooked
Mm.
constantly. So when you walk in the front door, you would smell, whether it be the chocolate chip cookies that somebody requested. Actually, those were just always being made. But I remember one woman, Catherine, loved borscht. That was her favorite meal, her favorite thing. And for her, it brought memories back of growing up. And so there's the smell of borscht being
Which
cooked,
is
you
not
know?
for everyone, not for
Not for
everyone, but
everyone, but it is a smell and it's a sense and it, you
yes.
know, so smell and also hearing, right? We
Yeah.
know that hearing is the last sense to leave us as we're leaving this world, our bodies. And so extra attention to acoustics, how we're speaking, you know,
Yeah.
just being aware of sound.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that that was something that I learned there, and that was something that BJ really introduced was bringing aesthetics first, you know, to the forefront of creating an experience for somebody, so they're living their our we're all living our kind of like full lives all the way up until the end
All the
of
way
our
up.
lives,
Yeah.
you know?
That's so beautiful. And I appreciate the way that you brought in that wasn't something I had language around before, but that the aesthetics and beauty and when we can be with it, it has a way of us bringing us back to our bodies. And for so many of us, whenever we're faced with something uncomfortable or that brings up discomfort, or for those of us, you know, I've shared it before, you know, who have experience of trauma in our past, we live so much of our lives outside of our body. So it's not just that we're not paying attention to people, but we don't even know what we can know or what's happening inward because we're, you know, disassociated, to use a clinical term, but we're so much. And so I do love the way the smell, a song, a
Yes.
voice, a painting, a flower, whatever that is, can like bring us back into our body, which is both a gift to us and a gift, and is the only way we can actually really truly pay true attention to somebody else, is if we're really in our own
In our own
embodied,
experience.
in our
Yes.
own experience. And that's the best gift. That's really the best gift. It's so hard for so many of us to understand, um, because it seems too simple and quiet, and it's the non-action, but the real, genuine, embodied attention that we pay to somebody
Yeah.
is so beautiful. And I appreciate you saying that, you know, you drawing Tildy versus just sitting by your aunt's bedside kind of got you in your body, maybe in a way, because you were using
Yes.
your body to draw, but that allowed you to be
Yes.
present. Yeah, tell
So
me a little
that
more.
I mean, I think that's so astute. With drawing, while it is primarily a visual medium,
Yeah.
I think encompasses all of the senses. So much of it, it's a very tactile experience,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
The feeling of a pencil on paper.
Yeah.
And I think this is interesting with Tildy. Usually I draw with pen, but with Tildy, I was drawing with a very soft pencil on rough paper. And that literally does slow you down more. It's a rougher surface. You
Yeah.
can feel the texture of the paper. You can hear the pencil. You know, it's
Yeah.
and it's a very physical act. And so it does, I believe, move
Yeah.
the feelings and the connection into my body when I'm drawing, and through my body and then onto the page. And so it's also taking the big feelings that I'm
Yeah.
having, which, to be like totally honest, I'm not always really in touch with, you
I
know?
mean, none of us
I
are. None of us
not
are.
all the time, right?
No.
And when I draw like that, it settles me down into my body. It brings my heart rate
Yeah.
down. It slows my breathing so that those big feelings can actually have space to
Yeah.
come up, but then my body's still moving, and I feel like they have a way to come up and then come out.
Yeah.
And then after I've drawn something, I have this picture that's evidence of that experience. So like I said earlier, I do believe that drawings hold energy and hold power.
Yeah.
And for the drawers, and now this is where I start recruiting people for a drawing, it does not have to be a good drawing. It can be a loopy squiggle doodle.
Yeah.
Having the experience of drawing and then to be able to hold something that we created from those big hard feelings, to turn that
Yeah.
into a creative act that ends up being something that is maybe beautiful, maybe
Yeah.
squiggly, maybe whatever.
Yeah.
um, I find that to be like a healthy thing for me.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
love it. And for those of you who haven't checked out her TED Talk, The Art of Paying Attention, which again, I'll drop in the show notes and link on my socials. It's so brilliant. I mean, I absolutely thought it was so creative. And it's exactly what you're talking about, this sort of intimacy. I mean, I just delivered a TED Talk this year and I just talked to
Mhm.
the audience, but you were like, no, I'm going to flip this on its head and I'm going to put paper and pencil in the audience, or pen, and I'm going to invite the audience to an activity. Can you tell us a little bit about the 60-second drawing, and what, like what you ask the audience to do, but what we, the listeners of this podcast who are going through, who are maybe having to attend to the bedside of somebody they love or already have, or experiencing grief, what you were hoping the audience and what we might get out of that little 60-second exercise. Y'all, if you haven't watched
Yes.
this talk, you've got to watch it.
Yes,
It's
everybody can
phenomenal.
watch it. And hopefully when your listeners do watch this talk, I invite them to watch it with a pen and a piece of paper
And
and a
somebody
friend
else.
and
Exactly.
someone else, so that
Yeah.
they can do it too. This is I'm on a mission to get everybody in the world to do this.
I love it.
Um, it's a very simple exercise which can be done with somebody who you know intimately and love, or a stranger.
Which is what
Um,
happened mostly in the audience, probably.
Mostly in the
Yeah.
audience. And
Yeah.
it's a very simple exercise. I ask people to draw each other for 60 seconds, which most people find incredibly intimidating because we think we should do a good drawing. But I give
Right.
them two rules, right? It makes it almost impossible to do a good drawing. One
Yeah.
is to never lift your pen up off the paper.
Love
And
it.
the other is to never look down at the paper upon which you're drawing. You can only look at the person you're drawing the whole time. It's an exercise called a blind contour, and it's one of the first things that we learn in art school.
Yeah.
It's an important exercise because, kind of like we were talking about how we move through the world in such a distracted way, we do that visually too. Our brains, we have so much information coming in all the time that our brains are always kind of making like shortcuts and filling the world in with patterns. So we end up not actually looking closely and seeing who and what's in front of us. And this blind contour exercise, it retrains our brain to see who is really in front of us. Um, it's a soup in 60 seconds. I invite your listeners to press pause and do it right now.
Yeah, I know. I know.
And what people don't realize is at the end of 60 seconds, they have this fun, hilarious looking drawing that looks like a Picasso. You know, it's,
Yeah.
the hair is on
Right.
all over the place. It's like, it's super silly. And also, they've just looked at somebody else for
Yeah.
60 seconds without looking away. And they've allowed somebody else to look at them for 60 seconds without
That's what I
looking
love
away.
about it. It's both the witnessing and being seen. I mean, because what we are craving is feeling held and seen, right? In all, I mean, definitely in our pain and in our suffering, but also in our joy or in our everyday. And you're seeing, as the drawer, you're not seeing the story of the person that might be in front of you. Oh, they're a
Right.
successful this, or they're a what, like all the stories we have of people that get in the way of us actually having a real authentic connection. I love this exercise because it strips away. Um, you can't really be worried about their degrees or their social media success or their relationships or anything, because you're just paying attention in this
And I
moment.
think that when we're paying attention, it this goes back to what you were saying about how we kind of do this inner work first to be able to show it for somebody else.
Yeah.
When we're really open and paying attention to somebody else, it allows them to be open and pay attention to us, and this beautiful mutuality
Yeah.
happens.
It's such a
Um,
beautiful dance. Yeah.
then I think it's kind of what when we talk about presence, like
Yeah.
maybe that's what we're going for, right?
Yes.
Um, and I have a really hard time doing it. Like, I have to be really clear here. I am the opposite of an expert on how to be with somebody at the end of life. No, these are the words of caregivers. I am trying so hard to learn. And I'm
Yeah.
using the tools that I have to do it. And I'm trying to learn to slow down and to pay attention and to be more present. And drawing for me
Is
is a
that?
tool that I think we can all use. It works for me,
Yeah.
so that we can start to like build those muscles, you
Yeah.
know?
I love that. And I love that. And I've heard you say that too. Like, just like I often, there's no one right way to grieve. There's no one right way to be with people at the end of their life. And we're going to talk
Right.
maybe a little bit about the five things to say, but to your point, it's, you don't even have to be the expert at it. It's just, what are the tools that so if you're a listener, it might be you're a knitter, or you are a, storyteller, or you're something that is authentically you, that allows you to drop into the present moment. And to your point, if you're there listening, because I definitely had this reaction too, like, oh my, I'm creative, but I'm not a good drawer. And forget that expertise idea. It's not actually at all about the drawing. I mean, it's not
If I
about the finished product.
The outcome. I mean, if I can
Yeah.
make one more analogy
Yeah.
between the bedside
Yeah.
and drawing, it's that we do have these, we bring expectations into
Yeah.
everything, and we're trying to get towards an end goal,
Yeah.
right? We have an idea of the way things should go or we want them to be. And what that can often do is keep us from being really fully immersed in the process and in the moment.
Yes.
And drawing is a practice that we can do, that if we can eliminate the idea of an outcome, that we're trying to make something that it hangs on a wall and
Yeah.
everybody admires us for it, forget that. Forget it.
Yeah.
What drawing is using a pen or a pencil to make marks on a page. That's all we're doing,
Yeah.
is we're using our bodies to
Yeah.
focus, to look closely and connect with things and people. If we can if we can focus and be present like that through an action like drawing, imagine how that will help us let
Yeah.
go of the expectations and anticipation that we bring into our relationships, especially in important moments, like the most important moment, like when somebody's dying,
Yeah.
and be able to like really just be, you
Yeah.
know,
Oh,
hope.
that is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. I really appreciate that you know, reminder. And it reminds me again, it's been a while, but since my conversation with BJ Miller a few seasons ago, one of the things we were talking about, um, as I was trying to think, he sort of helped make the distinction between suffering, which we all experience, which actually in a way is the grist that helps us, grow in whatever, and then unnecessary suffering. And unnecessary suffering comes from kind of what you were just talking about, is the energy we spend between what is and what we wish would be. And that includes the kind of shoulds that we have about, I have to be a painting that my grandmother's proud of that can hang somewhere. And so whatever practice allows us to set down that unnecessary suffering and come back to what is, and not be stuck in that gully between what
Yes.
is and what we wish it would be
Yeah.
is not just a gift to the person. If we're talking about, sort of attending to somebody's bedside, it's a
Yeah.
gift to ourselves. And it's one that translates
Mm.
as a parent, as a friend, as a, neighbor, what in any domain in our life,
In
right?
any
Is to
relationship.
set down that's where so much of our unnecessary suffering is in that space in between. And usually we know that because the word should or shouldn't is cropping up.
Yeah.
There's some judgment that's cropping up in our inner monologue.
That's so beautifully put. Thank you for that reminder. I'm going to
Yeah.
carry that into my conversations with people I love today.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
it's an ongoing practice,
It
right?
is an ongoing practice. And again, there's another should. We think we should have it all figured out, or you probably, there might be a, like oh, well, I do this, like I talk about grief for a living. And then sometimes I find myself just not practicing my own, invitations and wisdom. And it's like, oh, there I go being human,
Yeah.
you know,
Humaning again.
I'm
Yeah.
doing that humaning thing. I wanted to read this little passage at the end of, Dr. BJ Miller wrote an opening to your book, and then you wrote a beautiful opening as well. And then as you shared, listeners, she has these beautiful illustrations, and then the wisdom that is in the book are sort of a little poetic moments or notions, I would say, from the caregivers that you learned from. But this passage, I think, captures the gift of your book. He said about your book, may this book be a portal, a way for us to move beyond the unwise territory of trying to do it right and into the transcendent terrain of noticing what we can notice, loving who we love, and letting death, like life, surprise us with its ineffable beauty. And I think that is exactly what your book does for us. And it's the most important reminder in that the more we are wrestling with the right way,
Mhm.
the more we miss the beauty of the current moment, right? If you're
Mhm.
worrying about trying to be in a certain way with your Aunt Tildy or say the right thing or, you know, something like that, you're missing maybe the way she looked back at you, or the way that you could notice a certain way that her hair was sitting, or how her hands
Yeah.
looked like your mother's hands, or whatever
Yeah.
you discovered in that experience. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
So beautiful. So beautiful. So you spent this year in residency, learning, of course, drawing and learning from these caregivers about um, what it means to be with somebody kind of at the end of their lives. And, in the book, you reference the 5 things to say, which, by the way, doesn't require you to wait till the end. And you can even, I would say, even these things are that we're going to talk about, the 5 things to say, actually even apply to those of us in the wake of a death loss, that these are conversations we can actually have with our loved ones sort of after. The 5 things are: I forgive you. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. Goodbye. Ooh, made me
Yeah.
feel some feels there. I know this comes from various people. You learned it from the trainer at Hospice. These are points of conversation. What did you learn about these 5 things? What do we need to know about them? Again, whether we're kind of coming up, because many of us are accompanying somebody, in this season of our life, or even kinds of conversations we might want to have with those who've passed.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing them so beautifully. Like it's there. They always bring up feelings for me
Yeah.
too, whenever
Yeah.
I sit with them. As it was explained to me by a gentleman named Roy Reamer, who was leading the training of volunteers for many years, that these 5 things are conversation openers, or ways and entry points into deeper conversations
Yeah.
that we can have with people. They've been shared across many cultures. They've been published in a lot of different places,
Yeah.
but uh, there's something that anybody can use
Yeah.
to make sure that nothing is left unsaid.
Yeah.
That if there is something to share, that this is an open door to do that. And while it was shared with me as something to use at the end of life, just like you said, there's never a time that it isn't a good time to say the five things. I mean, there's people in my life who their health is changing, or even if not, like these are conversations that create openness and intimacy between
Yeah.
people, you know.
Yeah.
So we can use them at any time during life, and then just like you said, afterwards. I mean, I think a lot of us stay in conversation with people,
Yeah.
who are no longer on this earth with us,
Yeah.
and we can start those conversations at any time and keep them going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, we don't need to wait until we're at the end of life with someone
No.
to have these conversations. Yeah. And I want to recognize that, for many people, you experience loss, in an instant. We didn't know. Not everybody has
Yes.
a hospice journey or some journey where they have the sort of notification. And so I just wanted just to name that and to honor that. As a listener, if you're saying, yeah, but that doesn't apply to me, I would say, um, first of all, I'm holding you in my heart. But second of all, I would invite you to think about how you might want to have these conversations um, with your loved one, whether that's, I mean, I still talk to my late husband out loud sometimes in my
Mhm.
house and even to my friend Joe. Sometimes I write, or talking to a therapist or a friend and processing these things. I think there's ways in which we're always part of how we move forward with our grief, which is what we do, not move on from it. I think
Yeah.
as we continue to build like a bigger story, we have new experiences and a bigger
Hmm.
story. It goes from being sort of our whole book in the beginning is how it feels. This is what I shared in my TED Talk, to becoming sort of a chapter in our story, but we're rewriting all the time. And part of how we might be invited to rewrite and to carry the relationship with that person forward is to be, in a way, using these 5 things to say as conversation starters or things that we need to weave a story around to help kind of bring that person forward with us in a way that feels, I don't know, meaningful or
You know
important.
what that makes me think of is a conversation I had recently with Lady Bird, who I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
When I've spoken with people about the five things, some people have shared with me that it was helpful for them to and like letting go of things that they were holding, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was like framed as a letting go. And when I was speaking with Lady Bird, I brought that up. And she said, yeah, letting go might be part of it, but she says, I don't think of it as much as letting go as it is um, getting closer. So maybe there's things that
Yeah.
are standing in the way of continuing to get closer to somebody even after they've passed, right?
Yes.
Like we can still
Yes.
continue that connection. So it's not, so there are things we need to let go of.
Yeah.
It's not letting go of a person, you know? We
That's
don't.
such an important point. I mean, when you think about the words like "I forgive you," "Please forgive me," we might be thinking that we're wanting to let go of grudges or resentments or whatever, and that might be what you're letting go of. But part of why we do that are those are the things that are the barrier between us and our connection to that person.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
kind
I
of
thought
what
that was
you're.
like a very important
Yeah,
fine point to put on that. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Um, I don't know if this is a sort of, you know, U-turn or sideways off the topic turn, but I think I had read or listened to, I wish I would have made notes in my research, that you also took some of this work around illustrating and being present, this practice, into prisons. Did
Mm,
I?
yes. I've
And I just wonder, because
drawn,
I've been thinking a
yeah.
lot about, I just wanted to preface if
Mm, please.
there's a relevancy here. I've been thinking a lot about the unattended to grief and loss that happens in the prison population, not just the loss of freedom and identity and all those things, but even the losses that maybe they don't get to attend to, whether it's fellow inmates or are people on the outside. And so I just wondered, in the context of that, what did you discover about this work inside prisons?
Ladybird is very present in our conversation today. So
I
she
love that.
invited me. Yeah, she's a gift to the world. She after we had the experience of being at Zen Hospice at the same time, she had recently co-founded a group called the Humane Prison Hospice Project. I think that's
Okay.
it. And they were working in San Quentin and advocating for hospice to be in prison. There's only, I think, one hospice program in all of California in a prison.
Wow.
Um, and that means that people who die in prison either do so in like a medical facility without anybody who they know or who they love and who love them around them, or they die in their cell without any medical attention with their cellmate, and then their cellmate is put in solitary confinement until that it's proven that there was no like quote unquote crime. It's
Yeah.
so they were training an incredible group of men to become hospice caregivers to one another so that they could sit at the bedside of folks,
Wow.
their fellow folks who are incarcerated, who are dying. And she invited me to go and spend time with them in those trainings and draw and share the story of this training and of these gentlemen who were wanting to do this. And it was an incredible experience. Um, it's a place where people's agency is completely taken,
Yeah.
from them, and
Yeah.
the act of this kind of drawing, I think it's very different than a camera. When somebody puts a camera in your face, it can be a kind of objectifying situation. It's a
Yes.
one direction thing. It's really fast. You don't really know what's going to happen with it. Whereas drawing in those circumstances, it takes a long time. I would show the guys
Yeah.
everything that I did. We sat down and chatted for a while and made this piece. So I think I ended up going for about 6 weeks, and a piece was published in California Sunday Magazine that tells the story of um, the program and the
Okay.
men. So I'm kind of, again, this is things Lady Bird said. I don't feel really comfortable saying it, but
Yeah.
what she said is
Yeah.
that the way that she saw that I draw is it's a very connected.
Yeah.
It's about making connections with people. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you the secret. Like what's really underneath all of this is that I
Yeah.
just love people, and I really love getting to know people. And I'm we're social workers. This is
Yeah.
why we
This is
do
like
what we do. This is what it
exactly.
is. And
Yes.
drawing is almost like this kind of sneaky way that I get to like connect with people.
Yeah.
And so she saw that would be something that would be a great experience for the guys and for me and
Yeah.
for all of us. And it
Yeah.
ended up being that way. It goes back to the blind contour drawing thing. There's a real vulnerability when you
Yeah.
have two people who are being open together instead of a one-way thing.
Yeah.
And I think that this kind of drawing enables that.
Yeah. I don't know if this parallel is going to make sense to anybody, but as you were talking, I was thinking not only do prisoners not have agency, they also are invisible in a way to the world. That's just kind of the very nature as we put them away. And I often think for those of us who are in deep early grief, that's also how we feel. We don't have any control. This
Mm-hmm.
thing happened to us that we would never have wished. And we sort of feel invisible because, again, we want to just keep your grief in the little container away from the
Yeah.
public, forum. And so your slow, deliberate, sort of intimate experience of drawing someone, I can see very much being a gift, different than, as you said, a
Mm.
photograph is maybe a little more voyeuristic. Not that there's anything against photography, but
Yeah.
it's a little more unidirectional. And the intimacy that you have, the gift of we all know that feeling when someone showed up in our lives and sat with us and really saw us, not trying to fix us, not trying to judge us, not trying to pity us, just are with us. And to feel seen is just, I think, the most fundamental need, that we
Yeah.
have as humans. So I love that your project maybe gifted that to them and maybe got them
It
back in
was
touch
a
with their humanity.
definitely exchange.
Oh, for
It is
sure.
true, as you're saying that, I think about San Quentin. So I grew up in the town, Marin County, in the area
Yeah.
where San Quentin is. I went to a high school that was designed by the same architect that created the prison, and in Marin, which is it's a beautiful place. It's one of the wealthiest places like in the country. I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's all right there. And then there's San Quentin, this maximum security prison that's just sitting there, and that nobody really, it's right there, but
Yeah.
nobody sees it. And
Yeah.
nobody thinks, oh gosh, there are thousands of people in there,
Right.
there's a whole world going on
Yeah.
right there, but nobody sees it. So
Yeah.
going also for me being from there, and then going inside and really looking,
Yeah.
um and making drawings and then bringing those out to the outside world was very powerful for me personally. And from what I hear and have heard,
Yeah.
they were very happy with the outcome of the stories too. Although, of course, guys, like, that doesn't look like me,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's accurate. He's much more
True.
handsome than my drawing. Yes. The other thing I just wanted to, it's just an
Yeah.
interesting little point about language. When you're talking about like a photograph versus a drawing, both are very important, serve unique purposes. Sometimes there's
Yes.
overlap, but the language is important. We say we take a photograph, right? And we make
Yes.
a drawing. We
Mm.
take a photograph. So it's a momentary grabbing of something,
Yeah.
right? Or
Yeah.
we shoot a photograph, right? Which is like
Yeah.
it's a violent act, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Momentary. But we make a drawing, or we create a drawing, and there is a creative time put into something there. So I think they're just two very different experiences.
Yeah. There's just a real life energy. And as you said, more of an exchange, of it's more of an exchange because you receive as the artist, as the one doing the drawing, as the one
Yeah.
receiving. Yeah. Um, is there anything else that you want us to know about this book? I mean, I could read, actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to read this one passage that you offered in the beginning because I think it might be a great place to sort of close our conversation today, but it sums up so beautifully the work that you did. You said, speaking of what drawing means, drawing is a way we can look closely at something we might otherwise be afraid to look at. I made this little book to help people, maybe you and certainly me, look closely at things that can feel scary, that we might otherwise avoid. For many of us, it's hard to know what to do when someone we love is dying, how to be, when to help, what to say. And though there isn't one right way to care for someone, hospice caregivers have experience we can all learn from. Their wisdom extends beyond the bedside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I stand by my words. Um, I am so grateful to the caregivers who spent the time with me and were generous to allow me to share their
Yeah.
words. The
Yeah.
last thing I just share about it is it
Yeah.
is unlike other books. I mean, it's very sparse. It's very spare, I should say.
Yeah.
It's very spare. The drawings are simple. They're people, or a few people, mostly removed, plucked out of the background and centered. And the reason why I draw like that is because I'm really trying to focus on one thing or one person at a time or a relationship at a time, so that somebody who's looking at it can also give it and those people the attention they're due. And then the words, the pacing of them, it's more like a poem, and the way that they're paced. I'm hoping that when people sit down with this book, that they are quiet and maybe have a cup of tea,
Yes.
and are in a well-lit area and can take the time and move slowly through it and just really look carefully and listen deeply. That's the pace that the guest house moved at. That's the
Yeah.
pace that I witnessed at the bedside so much. And so
Yeah.
hopefully that this book, kind of like the five things, can open up a conversation for a lot of us.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate that so much. And I actually think that's why I fell in love with this book so immediately is, I mean, even as someone whose book is coming out this next year, Grief is a Sneaky Bitch, an uncensored guide to navigating loss, there's a lot of words, but there's a lot of white space too. And I bring in a lot of poetry and a lot of pause, because, which is what I love so much about your book. You know, poetry, drawings, they get at things. Was it Parker Palmer said, like what's it called? Like a slant, like we can get at things that we couldn't get at or receive with straightforward words and straightforward language. Sometimes it's too much, especially with our grief brain, which is a very real thing. It's very hard to process things, but also with the sort of intensity of what we might be experiencing. In your book, with the sort of poetic phrasing and the illustrations, and really it is such an invitation to sort of digest it slowly and with care, I think is exactly the right kind of book we grievers need, because it's too, we can't process it all at once. It's too much.
No.
But we try to, because again, we live in this world where we're trying to process it all and get back to work in a week and a half, because maybe we do or don't have, a bereavement leave. And so the pacing and the invitation and the poetic nature of the book, I think, is exactly such a beautiful mirror and opportunity for those of us who are being with our grief, whether it's new to us or even if it's been some time. I mean, as I said, it's been 12 years since my husband passed, and sitting with this book, I'm a coffee drinker, not tea, sorry, but sitting with this book with a cup of coffee got me thinking about some conversations I still wanted to have with Eric even 12 years later. So I think wherever you are on your grief journey, absolutely, How to Say Goodbye is going to be such a gift. Wendy MacNaughton, thank you so much for this beautiful conversation today on Grief is a Sneaky Bitch. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope it's not our last time to chat.
Oh, no, Lisa, this has been really important conversation to me. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And thanks for watching another episode of Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Kiefhofer. And don't forget, if you love the show, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment. Share something that you learned from our conversation today.